you know there's something profoundly unsettling that happens to certain people. And if you're watching this, there's a good chance it's already happened to you. You walk into a room and you feel everything. The tension hanging in the air between two people who claim to be fine. The grief hiding behind someone's practiced smile. The fear beneath all that forced laughter. And we've been told our entire lives that this is a gift, haven't we? This ability to perceive what others miss, to see through the mask, to sense the undercurrents. But what if I told you that this very capacity, this crystal clear seeing, might actually be one of the most dangerous things you'll ever possess? Not dangerous in the way you might think, but dangerous in a way that could fundamentally alter your relationship with reality itself. If this resonates with you, please give this video a thumbs up and share your experience in the comments below. Your story matters, and others need to know they're not alone in this. And if you're ready for more profound insights like this, subscribe to this channel. Now, I'm not talking about physical danger here. I'm speaking of something far more subtle and far more devastating. The danger of becoming so profoundly aware that you can no longer participate in the beautiful unconsciousness that allows most people to navigate their lives in relative peace. You see, society operates on a kind of collective agreement, an agreement to stay on the surface, to keep things pleasant, to not look too deeply. Everyone at the party is playing a game, and they all know the rules without ever being told. You ask how someone is, they say fine, and you both pretend this is sufficient. You compliment the host, you laugh at mediocre jokes, you nod at stories you've heard 3 times before. It's a dance, and everyone knows the step. But then there's you, the one who sees through it all. You notice the wife who flinches almost imperceptibly when her husband touches her arm. You sense the colleague who's drowning in loneliness despite being surrounded by so-called friends. You feel the anxiety moving through the room like an invisible electric current. And this is where the first danger reveals itself, because once you see these things, you cannot unsee them. And more troubling still, your very presence becomes a kind of mirror that others cannot bear to look into. The first danger is isolation, but not the ordinary loneliness of having too few friends. I'm talking about something far more existential. The isolation of living in a completely different reality from everyone around. You're speaking a language nobody else understands. You're seeing a world nobody else can perceive. Think about it this way. Society is rather like a stage play where everyone has their assigned role. The successful executive, the devoted parent, the loyal friend. These are costumes we wear, characters we perform, and the play works beautifully so long as everyone stays in character. But you, with your penetrating awareness, you're like the person in the audience who stands up in the middle of the performance and shouts, "But wait, that's just an actor pretending." You can imagine how welcome that makes you. I once knew someone, let's call her Maya, who had this extraordinary ability to read people. She could walk into any situation and immediately sense who was genuine and who was performing, who was in pain and who was pretending strength, who could be trusted and who was hiding something. And you know what happened to her? She lost nearly every close relationship she had, not because she was cruel or judgmental, but simply because people felt exposed in her presence. They couldn't maintain their comfortable masks around her. Her friends would say things like, "You're too intense, you read too much into everything, can't you just relax and have fun?" But she couldn't, because seeing clearly isn't something you can switch on and off like a light. It's like asking someone who can hear to simply ignore sound. Once you've developed this capacity for deep perception, it's always there, always operating, always revealing what others desperately want to keep hidden. And here's the second danger, and this one cuts even deeper. When you see the truth of a situation, when you perceive what's really happening beneath the polished surface, you face an impossible choice. Do you speak or do you stay silent? If you speak, you risk being attacked. And I mean this quite literally. Though the attack is usually emotional and psychological, rather than physical. You'll be called negative, overly sensitive, a drama creator, a troublemaker. You'll be accused of seeing problems that don't exist, of reading malice into innocent situations, of being unable to just let things be. People will tell you that you're the problem, that your perception is flawed, that you need to lighten up. But if you stay silent, if you swallow what you see and pretend not to notice, you begin to lose contact with yourself, because every single time you ignore your own perception, every time you accept someone else's version of reality, when you know in your bones it's false, you're essentially telling yourself that your own experience cannot be trusted. And over time, this creates a kind of split in your being. Part of you knows the truth, but another part must pretend not to know it. This is a subtle form of madness, a quiet disintegration of self. I remember sitting in a business meeting years ago where everyone was congratulating themselves on how brilliantly a project was going, and I could see clear as daylight that the whole thing was about to collapse. The signs were everywhere: the forced enthusiasm, the careful avoidance of certain topics, the way people's eyes would slide away when uncomfortable questions arose. But when I gently suggested that perhaps we should examine some concerning pattern, I was met with immediate hostility. Not reasoned disagreement, mind you, but pure defensive anger. And this is what happens when you see clearly in a world that prefers comfortable illusion. The third danger is perhaps the most insidious. When you see clearly and others refuse to see, they will often turn their anger directly on you. Not consciously perhaps, they won't deliberately decide to make you the villain, but unconsciously, automatically, they will begin to treat you as if you are the problem, as if your perception is somehow creating the very difficulties you're merely observing. This is the ancient pattern of shooting the messenger. When someone points out that the emperor has no clothes, the crowd doesn't thank them for their honesty. The crowd turns on them for disturbing the comfortable fiction everyone was enjoying. Your clarity becomes a threat, and threats must be eliminated, or at least controlled. I've watched this pattern unfold countless times. The person who sees clearly gets labeled. They're too negative. They're creating unnecessary drama. They're emotionally unstable. They need therapy. They're paranoid. Notice how all these labels share one thing in common. They all suggest that the problem lies in the perceiver, not in what's being perceived. It's a brilliant defensive maneuver. Really, if we can convince you that your perception is distorted, we never have to examine what you're actually perceiving. We can maintain our comfortable illusions, and you become the convenient scapegoat for everyone's discomfort. But here's where it gets truly dangerous, and this is the fourth danger that nobody talks about. When you're constantly absorbing the emotional states and hidden truths of everyone around you, when you're perpetually picking up on what's unspoken and unfelt by others, you begin to lose track of what actually belongs to you. Your own emotions become entangled with everyone else. You walk into a room feeling perfectly centered and leave feeling inexplicably anxious or depressed or agitated. And you have no idea if these feelings are genuinely yours, or if you've simply absorbed them from the environment like a sponge soaking up water. This is exhausting beyond measure. Imagine never quite knowing which thoughts are your own, never being certain whether the emotion you're experiencing belongs to you or to the person sitting across from you. It's like trying to hear your own voice in a stadium full of people all shouting at once. Eventually, you might forget what your own voice even sounds like. People who live with this describe it in remarkably similar ways. They say things like, "I feel like I'm disappearing, like there's less and less of me and more of everyone else." And this isn't poetic exaggeration. This is a genuine psychological danger. When the boundaries between self and other become too permeable, when you're taking in too much without adequate protection, you can actually lose contact with your own center, your own essential identity, your own truth. Now, you might be sitting there thinking this all sounds rather hopeless, that being able to see clearly is some kind of curse with no redemption. But here's where everything changes, because the danger I'm describing is only truly dangerous when it remains unconscious, when you don't understand what what's happening to you, when you think you're going mad or that something is fundamentally wrong with you. But once you understand the game, once you recognize that your clarity is not a defect but a particular form of awareness, everything shifts. Not because the seeing stops, it doesn't, but because your relationship to it transforms completely. You begin to realize something profound. You're not required to save everyone from their unconsciousness. You're not obligated to point out every hidden truth or fix every unacknowledged problem. You see, the truly dangerous thing isn't the seeing itself. It's the compulsion to do something about what you see. The belief that if you perceive a problem, you must solve it. If you sense someone's pain, you must heal it. If you notice a dysfunction, you must correct it. This is where the real suffering begins, because you're essentially taking responsibility for things that were never yours to fix. Let me give you an image that might help. Imagine you're walking beside a river and you notice the water is cloudy and turbulent. You can see this clearly, while everyone else passing by seems oblivious or unconcerned. Now you have a choice. You can jump into that river and try to clear it with your bare hand, stirring up more mud in your frantic efforts, exhausting yourself in an impossible task. Or you can simply observe that the water is murky. Perhaps make a mental note that it might be wise to look for clearer water upstream and continue peacefully on your way. The river will clear itself when conditions are right. Your desperate intervention won't help. In fact, it will likely make things worse. This is the wisdom that must accompany clear seeing, the deep understanding that not everything you perceive requires your intervention. Not everything you sense demands your action. Not everything you understand needs to be explained or fixed or corrected. And here's the beautiful paradox. Once you stop trying to fix everything you see, once you relax into simply being aware without the compulsion to change or control, your perception often becomes even clearer, even more refined. And more than that, people begin to feel genuinely safe around, because you're no longer unconsciously demanding that they see what you see or change to accommodate your awareness. Think about it this way. When you encounter someone who sees you completely, who perceives your struggles and your mask and your pain, but doesn't need you to be different, who understands your fears without requiring you to face them on their schedule, who allows you to be exactly as you are. How does that feel? It feels like freedom, doesn't it? Like you can finally breathe fully, like you're being given permission to be human. This is what clear seeing can become when it's integrated properly, when it's held with wisdom and compassion. Not a weapon you use against other people's unconsciousness, but a gift you offer through your mere presence. You see them completely, and in that seeing, you allow them to be exactly where they are in their journey. This doesn't mean you approve of everything or pretend problems don't exist. It means you've stopped making their unconsciousness your personal project to fix. You've stopped believing that you're responsible for waking everyone up. I want to be absolutely clear about something, because this is crucial. I'm not suggesting you become cold or indifferent or emotionally detached. I'm not proposing that you stop caring about people or turn away from genuine suffering when you can help. What I'm suggesting is that there's a profound difference between compassionate awareness and compulsive fixing, between seeing clearly and making yourself responsible for what you see, between offering help and carrying burden that were never yours to carry. The danger of seeing what others don't lies not in the perception itself, but in what you choose to do with it, how you hold it, how you carry it. If you use your perception to separate yourself, to feel superior, to justify your isolation and loneliness, then yes, it becomes deeply dangerous. If you use it to attack others for their blindness, to shame them for not seeing, to punish them for their unconsciousness, then yes, it will destroy your relationship and leave you bitter and alone. But if you can hold your clarity lightly, if you can see without grasping, perceive without controlling, understand without demanding that others understand too, then your awareness becomes something entirely different. It becomes a spacious presence in which others can gradually awaken at their own pace, in their own time, without being forced or pushed or judged or rushed. Here's what I've discovered after observing people with this gift for many years. The ones who suffer most are not necessarily the ones who see the most. They're the ones who haven't learned to protect themselves while seeing. They're the ones who absorb everything without any filter, who take on every burden they perceive, who exhaust themselves trying trying to wake up a world that simply isn't ready to wake up. But the ones who thrive, who manage to use their perception as a genuine gift without being destroyed by it, they've learned something absolutely crucial. They've learned to be in the world, but not completely absorbed by it. They can see clearly without being consumed by what they see. They can perceive deeply without losing themselves in other people's experiences. They maintain what you might call a conscious distance, not the distance of cold withdrawal or superiority, but the distance of healthy boundaries and self-preservation. And how does one learn this essential skill? It starts with spending real time alone. Genuine solitude, not just physical aloneness, but deep psychological solitude. Time when you're not taking in anyone else's emotions or thought or problem or drama. Time when you can settle like that muddy river we talked about, until you can see clearly which feelings are actually yours and which ones you've been unconsciously carrying for other people. It continues with learning to trust your perception without being controlled by it or driven by it. Yes, you see that your friend's marriage is falling apart. Yes, you sense that your colleague is profoundly unhappy beneath their cheerful exterior. Yes, you feel the deep dysfunction in your family system. All of this may be absolutely, undeniably true, but the question isn't whether you're seeing it correct. The question is what you're going to do with this information, with this knowledge. And sometimes, in fact quite often, the wisest thing to do is absolutely nothing at all, except hold space for truth to eventually emerge on its own timeline, in its own way. This doesn't make you passive or uncaring or spiritually bypassed. It makes you deeply wise, because you understand something that most people never learn. People change when they're ready to change, not when you've decided it's time for them to change. Problems get solved when the conditions are right, not when you've determined they need to be solved. Consciousness develops and expands at its own organic pace, which is almost never as fast as you'd prefer. So here we are at the heart of it all. The danger of seeing what others don't is absolutely real and shouldn't be minimized. It can isolate you profoundly, exhaust you completely, turn you into a target for other people's defensive anger, and cause you to lose contact with your own center and identity. But it doesn't have to unfold this way. Not if you learn to carry your awareness consciously and carefully. Not if you develop the inner strength to see without the automatic compulsion to fix everything you perceive. Not if you can remain true to your own perception while simultaneously allowing others to remain true to their own process of gradually waking up. The gift and the curse are actually the same thing, viewed from different angles. The question is simply whether you'll learn to handle this gift with enough wisdom and enough boundaries and enough self-knowledge that it doesn't become a curse that crushes you. Whether you'll develop the patience and the compassion and the discernment necessary to be clear without being destroyed by your own clarity. And perhaps most importantly, whether you'll find others who can see as you see, because I promise you they exist. Other people who live in this strange space of perceiving more than most, of sensing what's hidden, of knowing what's left unspoken. When you finally find these rare souls, when you can be fully seen by someone who doesn't need you to dim your perception to feel comfortable around, that's when the danger begins its transformation into something unexpectedly beautiful, because you realize with profound relief that you're not alone after all. You're not crazy or broken or defective. You're simply awake in a world that largely remains asleep. And there are others who are awake too, quietly holding space, seeing clearly, waiting patiently, and together, without force or pressure or desperate urgency, you can hold space for consciousness to gradually spread and expand like dawn, breaking slowly, gently, inevitably over a sleeping city. This is the hope hidden within the danger, that your clear seeing, when held with wisdom and compassion and strong boundaries, becomes not a burden you must carry alone in isolation, but a light you can offer to others, gently, patiently, allowing them to approach it only when they're truly ready, if they ever become ready. And if they never do, well, that remains their sacred right and their own journey. Your responsibility isn't to wake them up forcibly. Your responsibility is simply to remain awake yourself, to keep seeing clearly while learning to live peacefully and sanely with what you see, to carry your awareness as the profound gift it truly is, rather than allowing it to become the curse it could be. The danger is undeniably real, but so is the extraordinary possibility. The possibility that you'll learn to be conscious without being consumed by consciousness. That you'll see deeply without drowning in what you perceive. That you'll carry your awareness as a genuine gift to yourself and potentially to others, rather than as a heavy burden that slowly crushes your spirit. And that, my friends, that is the delicate art of living with eyes wide open in a world that overwhelmingly prefers to keep them tightly closed.